Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
I was lucky because there wasn't information. There wasn't a continuous stream of what we're talking about today. There wasn't that availability. There wasn't any knowledge about it. Particularly, it was something that I managed to sort of realise if I didn't change that, I would be, dead in 2 weeks.
When we look about recovery and we look about moving forward, it's about what are the circumstances that have created that avenue, and it just so happens that it might be gambling, or it might be drugs, or it might be alcohol.
It's a condition that we all have the capacity to struggle with or change. I think all things being equal and right, and having the right tools, you can change pretty much anything.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday. The home of the UK's conversation about mental health. Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name's Mick, and it's great to have you back with us. Got a really busy week this week, plenty happening. I'm actually in Westminster for one event. I've got another edition of the Football Untold podcast, which is going out and about as well. My mum's 70th birthday's coming up as well, so that's a big one in our house. So yeah, chock-up block. Thank you for you spending time with the podcast. Thank you for your downloads. Thank you for your streams. I always appreciate when you drop me notes or send me links to things that I should be checking out, or maybe suggest to me great topics of conversations that we can have in the future. I'm on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me on Instagram at Mr. Mick Coyle as well. You can also find my email address in the notes to the podcast as well. So do check that out and do get in contact if there's a great story that you think we should be sharing here at Mental Health Monday. What a legendary guest I've got for you this week, Brandon Block. Now, if you like your house music, your funk, your soul, particularly if you're around the scene in the 1990s, you will know Brandon very well. Now, Brandon hit rock bottom in 1996. Let me take you back to then, because then he was suffering with hepatitis C, tuberculosis. He had half a lung removed and was told he had 2 weeks left to live. He suffered with severe anxiety, paranoia, imposter syndrome, and it led to drug dependencies, particularly around cocaine. But he got help. He quit drugs and then moved into his recovery situation. Now, one of the organizations that he used around his recovery was Smart Recovery. Now, Smart Recovery is a free self-help mutual support program that helps people work together to examine or change their addictive behaviors. They've got all sorts of different tools that they use to allow you to find a way through your addictions and find a new life which is beyond your addictions. And Brandon is really, really passionate about this, as we will hear. Now, he's one of their new ambassadors, and as part of this ambassadorial role, he's encouraging people to walk the equivalent of the circumference of the earth to stamp out addiction-related stigma. Now, that's 24,901 miles. Now, Brandon's not going to do it on his own, and he's not expecting you to do it on his own. But actually, he is encouraging people to stand up and play their part and do their bit. I'll get you a link to that in a few moments' time, but it's a really great cause, and actually stamping out stigma is such a massive thing. It's thought that around 600,000 people currently in England alone addicted to alcohol. More than 400,000 to gambling, and those are the ones that we know about. 70% of substance users, though, in the UK are in full-time employment. It smashes through some of those preconceptions that we have around what addiction looks like. More than 5% of the population are currently addicted to shopping. There's a really big addiction story going on here, and actually it's really interesting to hear Brandon's take on that and how you can walk away from it. There's a website you can head to before we get into the conversation, uniteforrecovery.org.uk. That's uniteforrecovery.org.uk. I'll get a link to Brandon's social media on our social media as well, and in the podcast notes too. But it was a real pleasure to spend some time with him to hear his story. And I started off by talking about the fact that addiction is such a big word. What does it mean to him?
Wow. Well, for me, look, this is just me. I think addiction describes a condition which every human has the capacity to struggle with. Let's say struggle, and I mean struggle because it's always a negative connotation on that word, right? Unless, no, actually, that's probably not totally true. You say I'm addicted to the gym, they go, that's okay. If I'm addicted to, reading, if it's podcasts, that's all right. So it's the negative connotation around substances and behaviors which are generally not great for you. So for me, back in my day, I actually don't. I think there's a more modern word or thing we could use, which is less labeling, if that makes sense. So maybe behavior cycle or thinking cycle or bad habit, for instance, because when you when you change a bad habit, it usually takes generally, on average, and I'm just generalizing, up to 3 months, 90 days. So uh, if you know other models like 12-step, it takes 90 meetings and 90 days. So, and in other models, it will say on average to change a behavior and put in a new habit will be 90 days approximately. So, a behavior cycle is a great way to describe it. It's not so impending. Do you understand what I mean? So it's not as, you say addiction, you go, it's like, so smart. I just think that breaking the stigma around that word addiction, as well as the actual behaviors, is very important. But that's my take on it. But the word would really resonate and say, you know what, I get it. I mean, I do understand what it means. I've been there. I've experienced a great level. So that's my take on it. Really, it's a condition that we all have the capacity to struggle with or change. I think, hopefully, all things being equal and right, and having the right tools, you can change pretty much anything. Look at the world of personal development and people overcome incredible adversities, incredible, negative experiences, traumas, whatever you want to call it, and come out the other side. We're incredible, adaptable creatures. People learn to do things again once they've lost the ability to do so. So, I think it's important that we can remember that we are able to, let's say, or have the capacity to. This is an incredible tool, So that's my take on addiction.
No, I think that's really interesting. Thanks for your thoughts on that. I really appreciate it. I mean, I think it's one. I've done a lot of work recently in regard to talking about gambling addiction, and actually, just moving on to talk about alcohol addiction now with a project that I'm working on. And what really strikes me is that actually, it's not about the thing that you're addicted to. When we look about recovery and we look about moving forward, it's about what are the circumstances that have created that avenue, and it just so happens that it might be gambling, or it might be drugs, or it might be alcohol. How easy is it, I guess, is the important question, Brandon, to find the thing, the reason, if you like, that you've fallen into that particular trap? Is there a lot of soul searching that you've done yourself that allowed you to kind of go, oh, actually, maybe the reason I'm doing this is because I'm looking for this, or I'm dealing with this, or I'm trying to cope with that?
I think it's a great question as well. I think what you've just mentioned is a very astute, keen awareness, right? Which doesn't just happen unless you're very lucky. I was very fortunate back in '96 when I had this moment, epiphany moment, let's say, because I was very ill. But I also had this moment of clarity. I went, oh, I can actually live in this life without the drugs, but I need to stop doing that so I can get some clarity around me. And I wasn't able to look past the mask I created of, enabling to live in this life. So, yeah, it's like, I'm trying to articulate this the right way. So you have to get to that awareness. I think, it comes to, we talk about rock bottom, we talk about, it can be anything. It can be a change of environment, it can be a change of a life-changing experience. It can be anything that impacts on you in a way that is emotionally important, emotionally, spiritually important. And you'll then be able to look at it and go, oh, wow, this is problematic. This is something that I need to now look at. So often let's say I worked in the drug and alcohol field for a long time, right? So there's a tool which I like and I often use just as an example. It's quite easy to understand, and it's alongside a smart tool, let's say. It's called the cycle of change, right? So in theory, it takes about 2 minutes to talk about this.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
So in theory, right? So when you're let's say you're in those behaviors and you're not thinking about anything other than what you're doing. So as you said, the substances and the thing you're doing is incidental. You're actually probably masking or plastering something underneath, possibly, right? So there's no easy answer, I don't think, to say this is why I'm doing it. Because we are experiential by nature, i.e. humans, we like to experience things differently. We also live in a world now which is very near to stress all day long, right? So if you think about fundamentally living in that place for us to change that feeling, which is what we like doing, we're not necessarily in control of that. We go, right, oh, I fancy a little bit of a change of feeling because before boredom sets in, let's say. How do I do that? I'll go and get a drink. I'll go and get it because it's quick. I'll go on Amazon. Go, ding, here you go. Happy days. So you've changed that quick front way you feel right there. So there's all this stuff going on, and it's a strange one, but it doesn't get there. For me, I had this moment. As I said, I wasn't afraid to live anymore in the life, but that was way back then. So to make that decision was really sort of, I was lucky because there wasn't information. There wasn't a continuous stream of what we're talking about today. There wasn't that availability. There wasn't any knowledge about it. Particularly, it was something that I managed to sort of realize if I didn't change that, I would be, dead in 2 weeks. My doctor told me that, and I was very fortunate to find this doctor. So going back to the original question about knowing if it's going to happen or knowing you're in it, it's an experience that you will hopefully come to before it gets too damaging. And you're right about, I think the substances, let's say the behaviors, gambling, for instance, is very insidious because it's not tangible, isn't it? And so the wins can be very spasmodic, the losses often. And, without realizing you're in that cycle already, and it's ruined. I mean, all of it can be ruined lives. And I suppose that's when hopefully it doesn't get to that stage where you have to get to that place and go, oh, my life's ruined. I really need to address that now, Hopefully there's a way. Sorry, mate, go on.
No, I was going to say, well, and in terms of that now, do you think, I almost feel like, particularly the era you're talking about there, 1996, and I think it's a classic example of it. I think the mentality that we have now towards ideas around addiction comes from almost the tabloidization of people like yourself. There was almost this thing of like, random block, he's gone off the rails, or a stint in rehab. There was almost like an element of almost like a Jack the Lad kind of thing from the 90s. Like you'd hear about people going into the Priory, checking into the Priory, and it was almost as if they were going to a luxury retreat. But presumably from your point of view, hepatitis C, TB, half a lung removed, you've been told you got 2 weeks to live. At the point at which you've got to make those decisions, you're not like, oh, look at me, old Brandon's up to his usual tricks. That's like serious stuff. Like, that is really heavy. And yet, I guess for the rest of the nation, it was like, oh, what are these DJs like, really? And I feel like now, even still, the legacy of that tabloidization of that situation, like yourself and footballers and people all around that, still carries with us, that people then think it's almost like a glamorous thing. But I mean, I'm sure losing half a lung is not a glamorous thing to happen to you. But I think this is where the changing conversation is, that we have to cut through a lot of that nonsense, which you just absorb from picking up newspapers or seeing things on TV. And that's a big shift to make, isn't it? Because culturally, that understanding isn't there. And maybe, just maybe through we'll go on to talk about what you're doing in a couple of minutes, that's starting to change now, that people go, oh, actually, yeah, this is really serious.
Well, I mean, look, the glamorization thing. Look, I stayed at my mental hospital when I went in '96 was 2 doors down from the Landmark on Marrowbone Road. So there was a glamorous hotel there, but I wasn't in that, right? And I get, look, the thing about the Priory, maybe that was, I've never sort of, you're right, I didn't think about that back then. Why would it be so, oh, they're going to stint in the Priory. I've been in the Priory 3 weeks. Mainly it was a money thing because it was obviously quite expensive. But funny you mentioned the Priory, the doctor who saved my life, basically, he was the head of the clinic, and he's now the head of the Priory, right? He's the head of the medical doctor and senior consultant psychiatrist of the Priory group. He was the head of the Charter Nightingale, Lisson Grove in Paddington, which was like one of London's first mental hospitals, I suppose. So he was the boss there, and he took me under his wing. Let's say he's still my mentor to this day. So I speak to him 30 years later. He just to see how I'm getting on, and he loves the work that I do, and this, that, and the other. But yeah, back then, I mean, I suppose maybe this is a thing. It's just come to me. Maybe that was a way of justifying what was going on. So make it a glamour thing, as opposed to, because don't forget, it was very stigmatized, wasn't it? It was really taboo back in it's 96, and that, it wasn't spoken about. It was very quiet, and it was very difficult to come out and say, hey, this is me, I'm in right trouble, because we would struggle with that now. We're always constantly asking people to speak out about what's going on for them and how they're feeling. So maybe that was a way of justifying that people are struggling and they're going to these places and this is what they're doing. So they sort of allow it in a way. I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe that's the case, but you're right. It did. Yeah, that tabloid thing back then was, I mean, I still got the article in Mixed Mag, but it was just because it wasn't known about, and especially not for DJs at the time or people in the music industry necessarily, because we just didn't have the information. So, I'm struggling. You couldn't tell anyone because you didn't have the ways and means of meeting people. People used to be out with you and just see you in, but I had no idea that underneath all that was troubles I'd carried through with me because we didn't have that. That's it.
So. What I imagine as well at the time, and this is me, I've spoken to a number of DJs who were sort of, who were active on the scene at that time. There is a sense that it was all sort of like seat of the pants stuff. And, and it was like, you were never that far from, the long arm of the law. You didn't often know whether or not the gigs you were booked into were going to get cancelled or if the venues were going to survive beyond, the next couple of weeks. And I kind of get a sense from that cohort of DJs, it was a little bit like, well, we'll just crack on. And I guess that short-termism is quite good fun. But there obviously are long-term impacts that come from that because you've got to have those coping strategies to be able to get beyond that setback or that night in the cells or that warehouse you couldn't find or that, those long nights at 8 o'clock in the morning when you're still going and you've not slept for a week. Those things must be really huge. And I imagine you're sort of smiling when I ask you this question. So you must look like that. There must be really fun memories you have at that time, but also you must have been thinking, a couple of early nights around that time would have suited me quite nicely. And maybe a quick office 9 to 5 would have just settled me through a couple of rough periods.
Oh man, I've gone back. I've asked that myself so many times. You know what you've just mentioned, and think about this. So that whole environment, right? Is it going to go on? Am I allowed? Is the rave going to go? The clubs? Or is it all a bit, as you say, near the mark? But then that's a buzz in itself.
Yeah.
So and notoriety, a bit of fame, and a bit all the things that change give you these significance. And this, I'm here as a human. I'm doing that. I'm doing something naughty, a bit near the mark. Blah blah blah. So all of that is about changing how you feel, about getting the buzz, which we want. And, that whole, it does make me laugh because it makes you think, God, why are we doing it as well? On top of all the other stuff, so secretly trying to get these incredible buzzes but non-stop and being up 8 o'clock for 4 days or 5 days. It was a very, very impactful time. And I think, now, and it seems like a lifetime. It is a lifetime ago for 27 years now for me. So, you say that, and I think, wow, that is some incredible sort of time, isn't it? To still be here, and life's a journey. Life changes on a daily basis. I mean, I know you. I love the awareness you have, and it's great to be able to talk about this stuff because obviously you know what you're talking about as well, and you must have had some experience in this. Environment, I would imagine.
Well, fingers crossed that comes across. Your episode 291 of the Mental Health Monday podcast. So it's 290 conversations before this one. So brilliant. Fingers crossed we're getting somewhere. Hey, I tell you what, if someone said to me, Brandon Block's going to walk around the planet to try and get people to unite for recovery around addiction, I'd say, is he really? 24,901 miles. But actually, you're asking people to join you with UK Smart Recovery to team up around this and almost pledge their miles and get their steps in. Walking's a really good thing, isn't it? Being out and about, just to sort of clear your head as much as anything. But it's obviously something you feel passionate about too.
Well, look, I mean, I dip in the sea. I've moved to Bournemouth, so I dip in the sea every morning now, which is an incredible reset. It's still freezing, unfortunately, because we were expecting to be slightly warmer at the moment, but it's not. But anyway, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not about necessarily walking. It's about putting a bit of exercise in, adding to the total mileage around the world, raising the awareness about smart recovery, which we need to talk about in a minute as well, by the way. Yes, just getting it out there and people, because I fell into smart myself 2005, 10-ish, around those, 15, 20 years ago. And I just found it, and what we've been talking about, the sort of interventions and the think processes about mental health and how we manage our thinking and the behaviours that go along with that. I kept on asking myself, why did, as you said, why did I end up in that place? Why did I do those things? Why did I end up being so intent on, was it partying or was it not? Was it something underlying which wasn't necessarily that, just that? And I was often asking the questions to myself, thinking, I just don't know. And then obviously I found smart, which is able to, because I think I'm quite, I think cognitively, I'm quite, I think as opposed to, I think creatively, but I think I've got that cognitive awareness. So I thought, I saw the smart tools and I thought, wow, this is really good. I like the way this works. I like the questions it's asking, and it's actually quite easy to understand. Because if you said to someone cognitive behavioral therapy, it's like, what? It's a 3 words which you have no idea about. So SMART is actually REBT, which is rational emotive behavioral therapy. So in theory, it's rationalizing the emotion which are created by the behaviors, and therapy enabling yourself to change those behaviors, to change the emotions and make it more rational. Because often our thinking is irrational when we are in the throes of, getting high or, losing our stuff and, just out there partying. You don't think rationally, do you? You react. You never respond to these situations. It's always a quick knee jerk because I want that fix. I want that buzz, or I want that different feeling. And SMART's really good at doing that. And so the walk around the world is raising the awareness for SMART recovery. It's now available. It's online. It's a free platform. It has been since the inception. And it's encouraging people to reach out if they're struggling. I'm sure, there's people, even to this day, and it's been a long, long time, and there's a lot of information out there. I mean, you just said you've done 291 radio shows on mental health, and, people are podcasting all day, every day about this subject. And we know, and it's great because the world is struggling, and it doesn't matter what you can do or say. I'm sure you have. I know I have moods which go like this, especially now, because it's like that whole uncertainty of what's going on. We're all in a fair state of limbo, it's fair to say, because everyone I speak to, if I'm working with my coaching clients or something like that, it's like, it's just resonating at a lower level. It's not a happiness level. It's like, where am I in life? Lots of midlife crisis, lots of, menopause, lots of stuff going on for people. So yeah, managing that stuff is key. I think being aware of what's going on in your environment. How am I feeling today? One of the smart tools is a really good one, right? So often, and whether you do or don't, we often pick our phones first thing up in the morning as a rule. And that's not just me. I'm mindful of it because I know I'm doing it. So I don't. I'll put it back down. What am I doing? I don't need it now, So that's the way people start their lives, often in their days, which is stressful because often it's looking at the wrong stuff. What have I got to do today? Overwhelmed straight away without even allowing yourself to enter the world in a rational state. So SMART tool is ask yourself a series of 5 questions. How do I feel today physically? How do I feel today mentally? How do I feel today spiritually? Am I feeling, what am I going to say to myself first thing in the morning? Like, suddenly wake up, I feel. As soon as you say I feel, you're going to command your subconscious and say, if I feel, I feel under weather, whatever, you're going to feel like that. It's going to be, and I would struggle to get to, normally say, if you ask those series of 5 questions in the morning, 4 questions, say, I feel like this. I'm all right. I've asked those questions. Now I can resonate at a different level. So that's one of the tools I really love. But yeah, so it's called self-management and recovery training. That's what SMART is. It's about self-management, about managing my own journey, but having the tools to do that and not reacting, not responding, not getting straight into, the world as it is, because it's crazy.
In terms of those triggers for you now that make you think, in a previous life, I'd have walked down this path. What are those things now that you are able to check before you take those extra steps that take you down something which might be problematic? What are those things you sort of recognize in yourself now?
Well, I mean, look, to be honest, I'm really, really fortunate. Because people ask me if you go into a nightclub or you go here, and I'm sure you've been around it, and I've been around, it's not something you can necessarily avoid. And I didn't choose to anyway. I don't get triggered by any of that. So my triggers now are more emotional triggers about stuff that's going on for me, i.e., how I'm feeling. It's never around substances. It's never about use of, as you said, incidentals. It's about me. So my triggers are emotional triggers. External, yes, relationships, usual. I would say normal trigger stuff. Stuff that everyday life. So road rage. I mean, I don't get road rage because I have a smart tool to do to stop me doing that. But why isn't life fair? Those sort of things. Why is it, all the normal stuff that we live at? So I don't actually think, touch wood, get those triggers that I know you're talking about. So I don't. It will never lead me that way. That my thinking never goes, I need to do that to get or to escape from this. Right?
Actually, yeah, and I think that's huge as well, because I think people listening to this will think, "Oh, I'll never be able to go in a nightclub again, or I'll never be able to go walk past a betting shop or go to a football match." But actually, what you've just described there is that emotionally you maybe grow away from those things because you're able to then view those incidentals, if we call them that, in a much wider context. And that's a big thing as well for anyone who's in recovery, isn't it? Because they're thinking, my life will never be the same again because I can't do this anymore. Whereas actually what you've just described is, no, you will be able to do things around that. That's not going to be like the elephant in the room constantly, because actually with the right tools, the right support and frameworks, you can actually put yourself in a place that you can view those things and understand why you found yourself in that place, while at the same time emotionally know that you don't have to go back to that place because you can put yourself in a different path.
And also, while you're in that situation, you realize the reasons why you don't want to do that. Because so in theory, what you do is over time, by putting yourself in this, I don't say, look, I'm not saying by any means go and stand in a pub all day, because there's a saying in recovery that if you stand in a barber's shop long enough, you'll have a haircut, right? So not what I'm saying is not go to, but over time, what you do is you reprogram your subconscious. So those thought pathways will change. So if you're saying, I do not do that, I chose not to do that a long time ago, I chose not to do it a long time ago, and over time, you replace that. So you would probably, and then you forget about it. I've forgotten about it. It doesn't even enter my realm of thinking if I'm in that environment. It doesn't, it's not something I battle with. It's not something I need to ask a question about. It's not something I can go, oh, it just doesn't, it's not even in my vision. Do you understand what I mean? I'm very fortunate that's happened, because I know that's very difficult for people to understand, but I can't, maybe because I put myself back in that environment straight away and just literally dealt with it, because I love my music, as we do, so that wasn't going to, I was told, no, you can't go. No. I'm going straight back, just not doing that, and I did. And I do it every weekend. So, that doesn't, it doesn't enter my mind. So that's with all the tools I've learned. So SMART included in there, an incredible toolkit of cognitive change tools. And as I say, the rational, as I said, responsible, didn't I? It's not like, don't react, try not to react, try to have a response which is conducive to your welfare, because we know those behaviors obviously take us to a place of not, self-esteem, self-loathing, it's a huge subject, obviously, as you know, and we can touch on it. And I think the more awareness we get out there, the more we talk about it, the more tools we create, as well as, learning, because you think about this, it's the biggest computer in the world and it's continually learning. So surely with a problem that's so fundamental as that, there's going to be ways to work with it, isn't there?
You would hope so. You'd hope so. Absolutely. Smart Recovery is a free self-help mutual support program that helps people work together to examine or change addictive behaviors. If you want to get involved in the walk around the globe, I've got a website for you as well, uniteforrecovery.org.uk. I'll get that in the podcast notes too. uniteforrecovery.org.uk. Brandon Block, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you speaking to us.
Really. You know what? And I'm going to listen to some of your podcasts. I'll be honest with you. I think it's fantastic. 291 is a hell of a lot. And I'm sure it's great that you're still advocating for that stuff, mate. And I think, the more importantly that you carry on and as many other people do it as well. And well done. So great to meet you too, mate. Where are you from, by the way?
I'm from part of the world. I'm from Chorley in Lancashire, so somewhere in between Liverpool and Manchester. Yeah. So if you ever did Park Hall, the Park Hall nightclub, that was the one. That was the scene.
I did the Phoenix Nights.
Oh yeah. They'll have you back. They'll have you back. Don't you worry about that.
Surely
FM. Yeah, exactly.
Great thing. I love it, mate. Brilliant.
Right, thank you for your time. Speak soon. Take care, pal.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.